The first dog to arrive at Atlas' house did not run from the rain because he was lost. He stood there because somewhere along the way, he had learned that even open doors could hurt. The storm came down over the edge of Asheville in long silver sheets, turning the gravel driveway into a dark ribbon and making the new wooden sign above the porch shine with fresh paint. Atlas' house was not much to look at from the road. Just an old white farmhouse with a repaired roof, 6 clean rooms in the converted side building, a fenced yard stretching toward the tree line, and one porch light that Caleb Rowe had promised would never go dark at night. Caleb stood beneath that light with Atlas beside him, listening to rain drum against the tin awning and run from the gutters in steady ropes. He was a white former United States Marine, broad-shouldered and quiet, wearing a dark field jacket over a plain shirt, his face calm in the way men look calm when they are holding too much inside. Atlas sat at his left boot, a strong German shepherd with sable and black fur, amber eyes, and the stillness of a dog who knew when a moment mattered. This was supposed to be the beginning. The first rescued K9. The first room filled. The first proof that the house Caleb had built with tired hands and stubborn hope could become more than wood, paint, and clean blankets. The rescue van rolled up just after sunset, headlights cutting through the rain. Its tires slowed over the gravel, and for a second, everything seemed to hold its breath. The wet trees, the porch boards, the empty rooms waiting behind Caleb. A woman from the rescue team stepped out, hood pulled low, clipboard tucked under her arm. She gave Caleb a nod that was both greeting and warning. "He is scared," she said. Caleb did not ask how scared. He had learned long ago that fear had many languages, and most of them never used sound. The van door opened. A large German shepherd stood inside, lean, dark, and motionless, his coat damp around the shoulders, his ears half raised, his eyes fixed on the porch light as if light itself required suspicion. The rescue worker clipped a loose lead to his collar and stepped back, giving him room. "His temporary name is Rook," she said softly. Rook did not look at her. He looked at Caleb. Then he looked at Atlas. Then he looked at the open front door behind them, where warm yellow light spilled across the wooden floor. Most dogs, tired from transport, would move toward warmth. A blanket, water, a safe voice. Rook did the opposite. He stepped down from the van, placed one paw in the rain, and stopped. His body lowered slightly, not in threat, but in refusal. Caleb took one slow step forward. Rook stepped back. Not far, just enough to say no. The rescue worker's face tightened with worry. Caleb raised one hand, not toward Rook, but gently toward the worker, asking for stillness. Atlas did something Caleb did not expect. He did not approach the new dog. He did not sniff the air or pull against the leash. He simply stepped down from the porch, walked into the rain, and sat on the wet gravel halfway between Caleb and Rook. Then Atlas turned his head away, softening his gaze, offering the one thing no human word could promise. No pressure, no demand, no trap. Caleb watched his dog and understood. Atlas' house would not begin when Rook crossed the threshold. It would begin right here, in the rain, with a frightened K9 standing 20 feet from safety and one loyal shepherd teaching everyone that trust cannot be carried inside. It has to be waited for. Caleb had not built Atlas' house because he believed he could save every wounded dog. He built it because one dog had once saved him, and that kind of mercy leaves a debt no money can repay. Years before the porch light ever glowed over the gravel drive, before the fresh sign hung above the steps, before the 6 clean rooms smelled of pine soap and new blankets, the place had been only an old farmhouse on 3 quiet acres outside Asheville. The roof leaked over the back hallway. The fence leaned toward the trees. The side building had been used for storage, with dusty shelves, cracked windows, and a concrete floor cold enough to hold winter in July. Most people would have seen work. Caleb saw a chance to make room. He spent months repairing it after long days at a small garage off the highway, coming home with his hands marked by motor oil and sawdust. He replaced boards one at a time. He painted the doors a soft blue. He built raised beds for older dogs whose joints needed comfort. He installed quiet latches because loud metal sounds could scare a nervous animal. He put rubber mats on the floors, filled a cabinet with clean towels, and turned the smallest room into a calm care space with soft light and shelves lined with simple supplies. None of it was fancy. That was never the point. Safety did not need to impress anyone. It only needed to be dependable. Atlas followed him through every hour of the work, lying in sawdust, inspecting fresh fence posts, resting his head on Caleb's boot when the man sat too long in the dark after sunset. Atlas was the reason Caleb understood the shape of healing. After leaving the United States Marine Corps, Caleb had come home with a body still strong enough to work and a heart that had forgotten how to rest. He moved through his days quietly, polite to neighbors, useful at the garage, steady at the grocery store, but inside his chest there were rooms he kept locked. Atlas found those rooms without asking for keys. On nights when Caleb sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, Atlas would press his warm body against Caleb's leg until the silence became bearable. On mornings when Caleb could not name the weight sitting behind his ribs, Atlas would bring his leash and wait by the door, reminding him that one step outside was still a step forward. So when Caleb named the house after him, it was not a tribute made for visitors. It was the truth. The place existed because Atlas had taught Caleb that trust was not a speech. It was showing up again and again until fear got tired of standing alone. Now, as rain tapped the porch roof and Rook stood 20 feet away from the open door, Caleb felt every nail he had hammered, every latch he had softened, every blanket he had folded waiting for this single moment. The rescue worker shifted near the van, but Caleb shook his head gently. "Give him time," he said. Atlas remained seated in the gravel, rain darkening his coat, his gaze turned slightly aside so Rook would not feel challenged. The house glowed behind Caleb, warm and ready, but Caleb did not call the dog forward. He did not crouch, did not reach, did not try to win anything. He only stood still beneath the porch light, letting Rook learn the first rule of Atlas House. No one here would force him through a door he was not ready to enter. Rook's file came in a thin manila folder that felt almost empty in Caleb's hand. The rescue worker passed it to him only after the German Shepherd had finally moved from the rain to the covered side entrance, not because Caleb called him, but because Atlas stood up, took 3 calm steps toward the open hallway, and waited without looking back. Rook followed at a distance, paused silent on the wet boards, body low but controlled, eyes measuring every corner of the unfamiliar house. Caleb kept himself turned slightly away, giving the dog space to enter without feeling watched. Inside, the first room on the left had been prepared for him. A clean bed sat against the wall. A stainless steel water bowl rested near the door. A soft blanket lay folded on the floor, and one small lamp warmed the room in honey-colored light. Rook paused at the threshold and studied it, as if comfort might contain hidden rules. Then he stepped inside, crossed the room without touching the bed or bowl, and settled in the farthest corner with his back near the wall and his face toward the door. Caleb did not follow. He only set the folder on the hallway table and read what little the papers could tell him. Adult male German Shepherd. Temporary name, Rook. Estimated age, 6 to 8 years. Prior working dog indicators. Limited response to handling. No confirmed original handler. Transferred through 2 facilities in 8 months. Caleb read the lines twice, then a third time, searching for the part that explained the look in the dog's eyes. It was not there. Paper rarely carried the truth of a living thing. It could list weight, age, and intake date, but not the moment hope became too expensive to keep. The rescue worker stood beside him, rainwater dripping from her jacket onto the mat. "He has never been aggressive with us," she said quietly. "He just disappears into himself. If anyone reaches too fast, he shuts down. If a door closes behind him, he will not move for hours." Caleb looked toward the room. Rook had not blinked. His eyes stayed on the open doorway, tracking every breath in the hall. Atlas lay down several feet away, outside the room, his body relaxed but present. The position was deliberate. Not blocking, not guarding, offering. Caleb closed the folder and placed it on the table. "Then the door stays open," he said. The rescue worker looked relieved, but still uncertain. Some places would call him difficult. Caleb's gaze did not leave Rook. "He is not difficult." His voice remained soft, steady, almost too low for the rain to hear. "He is surviving." The words settled into the hallway with the smell of damp fur and pine soap. Atlas lifted his eyes to Caleb, then lowered his head to the floor, as if agreeing. Rook watched them both, unmoving, but something in his breathing changed. It slowed by the smallest measure. Not trust. Not yet. Maybe only confusion. Maybe only the first crack in the belief that every new place ended the same way. Caleb turned off the overhead light in the hall and left only the lamp glowing inside Rook's room. He placed a bowl of food just inside the doorway, close enough to be found, far enough that Rook would not have to pass near a human hand. Then he stepped back and sat on the floor across the hall, his knees bent, his palms resting open where the dog could see them. He did not speak again. He did not try to make the moment holy. But there, in that old farmhouse at the edge of Asheville, with rain softening on the roof and Atlas breathing quietly between them, the first rescued K9 of Atlas House learned something small and unfamiliar. No one was closing the door. By the second morning, Rook had eaten every piece of food Caleb left near the doorway, but only after the hallway went empty and the house grew still. Caleb found the bowl clean at sunrise, resting exactly where he had placed it, as if the dog had accepted the meal but not the kindness attached to it. That was all right. Caleb had learned not to confuse progress with affection. Sometimes progress was only a full bowl becoming an empty one. He rinsed it quietly in the kitchen sink while the first blue light of morning touched the windows over the pasture. Atlas stood nearby, watching the hall that led to Rook's room. The farmhouse smelled of coffee, rain-soaked wood, and clean towels warming in the dryer. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the yard silver with puddles and the grass bent under drops of water. Caleb carried fresh food down the hall and stopped several feet from Rook's doorway. The German shepherd sat in the same far corner, awake, still, eyes steady on Caleb's hands. He had not touched the bed. He had not moved the blanket. He had not stepped fully into the hall. But his breathing was calmer than it had been the night before. Caleb lowered the bowl to the floor without crossing the threshold. "Breakfast," he said softly. One word. Plain. No pressure inside it. Rook did not move. Caleb stepped back and sat against the opposite wall with his coffee beside him, leaving the open hallway between them. Atlas lay down halfway between Caleb and the door, then turned his head away from Rook, offering the old courtesy again. "Do not stare. Do not crowd. Let fear keep its dignity while it learns." Hours passed that way. A delivery truck came and went. A volunteer named Jesse arrived with a box of donated towels, young, kind, and nervous in the way people become when they want badly to help. She paused at the hallway and saw Rook in the corner. "Poor boy," she whispered, taking one step forward. Rook's body tightened instantly. Not loud, not dramatic, just a full retreat into stillness, as if he could make himself disappear by becoming small enough. Caleb lifted his hand before Jessie took another step. "Stop there." Jessie froze, her face flushing. "I am sorry. I just thought maybe if he smelled my hand." Caleb shook his head gently. "Not yet." Rook's eyes stayed wide, fixed on Jessie, then on Caleb, waiting to see what the humans would decide for him. Caleb stood slowly and moved between the doorway and the hall, not blocking Rook, only giving him a clearer line of space. "He does not need to prove he is scared," Caleb said, his voice calm but firm. "We already believe him." Jessie lowered the towels against her chest. The words changed the air. Even Atlas lifted his head. Rook did not come forward. He did not soften all at once. But his ears shifted, catching the sound of a human voice that had not argued with his fear. Caleb asked Jessie to leave the towels by the laundry room and walk past without looking in. She did exactly that. Rook watched her go. Then, after a long minute, his eyes returned to Caleb. There was no trust there yet. Only a question. Caleb sat back down on the floor, farther away than before. He did not smile too much. He did not reach. He only took a slow breath and let the house settle around them. The door remained open. The food remained waiting. Atlas lowered his head again, patient as earth. And inside the first room of Atlas' house, Rook stayed in the corner, but he no longer looked like he was vanishing. He looked like he was listening. On the fourth day, Atlas stopped waiting for Caleb to understand and showed him instead. Morning had come bright and soft over the pasture, the kind of Carolina morning that made the wet grass shine like glass and filled the farmhouse with the smell of warm wood, fresh coffee, and clean cotton. Rook had eaten again during the night. He had even moved the blanket 6 inches closer to the doorway, though Caleb pretended not to notice. Pretending not to notice had become its own kind of mercy. Caleb was in the care room folding towels when Atlas came in carrying his old gray blanket in his mouth. It was the one he slept on beside Caleb's bed, worn thin at the corners, marked with the quiet scent of years together. Caleb looked up from the counter. You sure about that? Atlas did not wag. He simply stood there, amber eyes steady, blanket hanging from his jaws like an offering. Then he turned and walked down the hall. Caleb followed at a distance. Rook was awake in the first room, sitting near the wall, not hidden in the corner this time, but not free of it either. His eyes moved to Atlas immediately. Atlas stopped outside the open doorway, lowered his head, and placed the blanket on the floor. Not inside the room, not too close, just at the edge, where Rook could see it without feeling trapped by it. Then Atlas stepped back. Caleb felt the instinct to pick it up. The blanket was Atlas's favorite. It carried comfort Rook had not asked for. It might be too much, but Atlas looked at Caleb once, and the message was clear enough to silence him. Leave it. So Caleb left it. All day, the blanket remained untouched. Rook watched it the way he watched every gift, as if the gift might turn into a demand. Jessie came by with supplies and smiled when she saw it, but Caleb put one finger to his lips, and she passed without speaking. The house went on around Rook. A washer spun. A truck drove past on the road. Wind moved softly through the screens. Caleb fixed a loose latch in the back kennel wing and checked the fence line with Atlas walking beside him. Every time they passed the hallway, the blanket still lay where Atlas had placed it. By evening, Caleb set Rook's food down and left the lamp glowing low. He did not sit across from the room that night. He took Atlas into the kitchen, gave Rook the dignity of privacy, and let the farmhouse become quiet on its own. Hours later, after the porch light had painted the yard gold and the crickets had started their steady song near the fence, Caleb woke from a light sleep on the couch. He heard something small, a drag of fabric against wood. Then silence. He did not move. Atlas lifted his head from the rug, listening too. From the hallway came another soft pull, then the faint shift of paws. Caleb kept his eyes on the dark ceiling and held his breath. In the morning, the gray blanket was gone from the doorway. For one long second, Caleb thought Rook had pushed it away. Then he stepped closer and saw it inside the room, tucked beneath Rook's front paws. The big German shepherd was not lying on the bed. He was not near the bowl, but his chin rested on the edge of Atlas's blanket, and his eyes were half closed in the pale morning light. Atlas stood beside Caleb, calm as dawn. Caleb looked down at him and felt the lesson settle deep. Atlas had not tried to enter Rook's fear. He had only left proof that comfort could be offered and then abandoned without punishment. That was the first gift Rook accepted, not from a human hand, not yet, but from another soul who knew how to wait. That night, the storm returned with a different voice. It did not arrive as rain at first, but as pressure in the air, a low heaviness that settled over the farmhouse before the first flash of lightning touched the Blue Ridge. Caleb felt it while washing dishes in the kitchen. Atlas felt it sooner. His ears lifted, his head turning toward the hallway where Rook's room glowed with the small lamp Caleb never shut off. The first roll of thunder moved across the sky like a distant freight train. In the back wing, one of the empty room doors trembled softly in its frame. Rook did not bark. That was what made Caleb set the towel down. Some dogs told fear to leave by filling the room with noise. Rook swallowed it whole. Caleb walked to the hallway and stopped before the open door. The German shepherd stood in the far corner, not sitting now, not resting on Atlas's gray blanket, but standing stiff and silent with his head lowered and his eyes fixed on a place beyond the wall. His breathing came too fast. Not wild, not loud, just trapped inside a memory Caleb could not see. Atlas moved past Caleb, then stopped halfway between the hallway and the doorway, exactly where he had placed himself on the first night. Caleb lowered the lights in the hall until the house softened around them. He did not step into Rook's room. He did not say the dog's name over and over. He did not try to pull him away from the corner. Instead, Caleb sat down on the floor outside the threshold, his back against the wall, one knee bent, one hand resting open on his leg. Atlas lay between them like a bridge made of breath and patience. Thunder rolled again, closer this time, shaking rain loose from the gutters. Rook's eyes moved to Caleb's hand, then away. Caleb began to breathe slowly, not because he thought Rook would understand the idea, but because bodies sometimes remember safety before hearts can trust it. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. The same steady rhythm he had used on his own worst nights when Atlas pressed against his knee and refused to let the dark have the whole room. The storm thickened. Rain struck the windows in hard silver bursts. The porch light blurred against the glass. Somewhere in the care room, a metal tag on a spare collar clicked softly with each vibration of thunder. Caleb kept breathing. Atlas matched him. His chest rose and fell, slow and deep, his head resting on his paws, eyes calm. For nearly an hour, nothing seemed to change. Rook remained in the corner. Caleb remained in the hall. Atlas remained between them. But then the smallest thing happened. Rook's breathing missed a beat, then found the rhythm again, slower than before. Caleb noticed, but did not look directly at him. Another breath, then another. The storm did not stop. The world outside still flashed white beyond the windows. But inside that first room, something loosened by the width of a thread. Rook lowered his head a little. His front paws shifted. His eyes, which had been fixed on the invisible past, came back to the room, to the lamp, to the open door, to Atlas. Finally, to Caleb. Caleb did not smile. He did not praise. He only whispered, so softly the thunder almost carried it away, "That is it." Rook did not step forward. He did not lie down. He did not suddenly become whole. But he stayed with them, present, breathing, listening. And in Atlas' house, under a storm that could not be reasoned with, a frightened K9 learned that a human could sit near fear without demanding to own it. Morning came slowly after the storm, pale and clean, with mist resting over the pasture and water dripping from the porch roof in steady, patient drops. Caleb had not slept much. He had stayed near the hallway long after the thunder faded, not watching Rook, not guarding him, only keeping the promise of presence until the house grew quiet again. Now the farmhouse smelled of wet earth, coffee, and warm pine boards. Sunlight reached through the kitchen window and spread across the floor in soft golden rectangles. Atlas stood by the back door, calm and ready for the day, but he did not ask to go outside. His eyes were on the first room. Caleb filled Rook's bowl with breakfast, added a little warm water the way older working dogs often liked it, and carried it down the hall. Rook was awake. He was not in the far corner. He lay on Atlas's gray blanket, still near the wall, but his body had curved into it during the night, his chin resting where Atlas's scent was strongest. Caleb saw it and let the sight pass through him without comment. Some gifts had to remain unannounced. He set the bowl on the floor just outside the doorway as always, then stepped back and sat against the opposite wall, leaving several feet of empty space between his knees and the food. Atlas lowered himself beside Caleb, but this time he did not lie between Caleb and Rook. He stayed slightly behind, as if making room for a choice that no one else could make. Rook stared at the bowl, then at Caleb's open hand resting on his knee, then at Atlas. The house was so quiet Caleb could hear the refrigerator hum in the kitchen and the faint ticking of rainwater in the downspout outside. Rook rose slowly. One paw touched the wood floor, then the other. He stopped at the doorway, head low, ears tilted, eyes searching Caleb's face for the old danger that never came. Caleb kept his breathing steady. He did not smile too broadly. He did not whisper encouragement. He simply remained still, a man offering nothing but an unmoving place in the world. Rook stepped into the hallway. It was only a few inches, but it changed the room. Atlas blinked once and stayed quiet. Rook moved toward the bowl, ate 3 careful bites, then stopped. His gaze returned to Caleb's hand. Caleb felt the weight of that look all the way through his chest. He turned his palm upward on his knee, slow enough that the motion could be refused. Rook watched the hand for a long time. The hand did not reach. It did not call. It did not close. It only waited. Rook took one step closer, then another, his nails making the softest clicks against the floor. He lowered his nose until it hovered less than an inch above Caleb's skin. Caleb could feel the warmth of his breath. Atlas did not move. The whole farmhouse seemed to stand still with him. Then Rook touched Caleb's palm. Not a lick, not a nuzzle, just the lightest press of his nose against human skin, brief as a heartbeat and brave as anything Caleb had ever seen. Caleb did not lift his hand. He did not stroke Rook's head. He did not claim the moment for himself. He let the touch end on Rook's terms. The German shepherd stepped back almost immediately, startled by his own courage, but he did not retreat to the corner. He returned to the bowl and finished eating while Caleb sat with his palm open, holding the place where trust had landed for 1 second and left behind enough light to fill the hall. A few weeks passed before Rook began to choose the porch. At first, he only reached the threshold in the late afternoon, when the sun lowered behind the trees and the farmhouse settled into its gentlest sounds. The wind moved through the pasture grass. The porch boards held the day's warmth. Somewhere beyond the fence, birds called from the line of oaks. Atlas would step outside first, circle once near Caleb's chair, and lie down with his head facing the driveway. Rook would watch from the hallway, half hidden by the doorframe, as if studying a world that no longer asked him to disappear. Then, one evening, he came out. Not far, just enough to place both front paws on the porch boards. Caleb sat in the old wooden chair with a mug of coffee cooling beside him. He did not turn his head. Atlas did not lift his. The house did not celebrate too loudly. That was how Rook learned to stay. Day by day, his world widened by inches. He began eating while Caleb remained in the kitchen. He followed Atlas along the fence line, always a few steps behind, nose low, learning the map of the yard through scent and patience. He discovered the sunny place beneath the living room window, the water bowl by the back door, the soft rhythm of Caleb's pickup returning from the garage just before supper. Some days he still retreated to his room. Some mornings a dropped pan or a sudden knock at the door sent him back into silence. Caleb never treated those days as failure. He simply made the house quiet again and let Atlas show Rook the way back when Rook was ready. Jessie learned too. She stopped trying to help with her hands first and started helping with space. She left towels by the laundry room, placed treats on the floor without waiting to be thanked, and smiled only when Rook looked away, so he would not feel captured by kindness. Then came the second rescued K9, a smaller German shepherd, young but worn thin by uncertainty, arrived at sunset in a county transport vehicle. Caleb stood on the porch with Atlas at his side, feeling the old familiar weight return. The new dog would not meet anyone's eyes. It stood near the open gate, trembling in the orange light, unsure whether the house was shelter or another question it did not know how to answer. Caleb took one step forward, then stopped. Rook had risen from the porch. Slowly, without command, he walked down the steps. Atlas remained still, watching. Caleb felt his breath catch as Rook crossed the yard and stopped several feet from the new dog. He did not stare. He did not crowd. He turned his head slightly away, lowered himself onto the grass, and lay there in the same patient shape Atlas had once made for him in the rain. The younger dog looked at him, confused by gentleness that asked nothing. Rook stayed where he was, calm and quiet, offering presence without pressure. Caleb stood under the porch light with Atlas beside him and understood that something sacred had happened without announcement. The first dog who had refused every human hand had not become fearless. He had become useful to another frightened soul. And sometimes, that is the first true sign of healing. By the end of summer, Atlas House no longer felt like a promise waiting to be tested. It had become a living place, full of small sounds that meant safety had taken root. Nails clicked across the wood floors in the morning. Water bowls rang softly against tile. Clean towels dried on the porch rail under the Carolina sun. The blue doors Caleb had painted by hand opened and closed with quiet latches, and behind each one was a name written carefully on a wooden card. Rook's card hung beside the first room, the room he still returned to when the world became too loud. Caleb never removed it. Healing did not mean a soul had to stop needing shelter. It meant shelter was allowed to remain. Rook was different now, but not in the easy way people sometimes hope for. He was not suddenly playful with strangers. He did not rush into every room with bright confidence. Some mornings, he still watched new voices from a distance. Some evenings, he chose the hallway instead of the porch. But he chose. That was the miracle. Fear no longer made every decision for him. Atlas understood that better than anyone. The old shepherd had become quieter with Rook, gentler with the younger rescues, and almost proud in the way he stood beside Caleb at the gate whenever a new transport arrived. Together, they had built a rhythm. Caleb opened doors. Atlas showed patience. Rook proved that patience could be learned and passed on. On the last warm evening of August, Caleb sat on the porch as the sun slid behind the blue ridge, turning the pasture gold at the edges. Atlas lay on his left, head resting near Caleb's boot. Rook lay on his right, not touching it first, then slowly letting his shoulder rest against Caleb's ankle as if the choice had arrived quietly and decided to stay. In the yard, the younger rescued K9s slept near the fence, no longer trembling. Two more dogs rested beneath the oak tree, their breathing deep in the purple dusk. The porch light came on with a soft click above them. Caleb looked at the sign over the steps. then at the house beyond the open door. He thought of the first night, the rain, the dog who would not cross the threshold, and Atlas sitting in the gravel as if teaching the whole world how mercy waits. Caleb reached down, not toward Rook's head, but to the porch board beside him. His hand rested there, open and still. After a long moment, Rook shifted closer and placed his paw near Caleb's fingers. Not on them. Near them. It was enough. Caleb smiled softly into the fading light. Atlas gave a slow breath, the kind that sounds like peace when a loyal dog finally lets the day end. Atlas' house had not begun when the sign was hung or when the first room was finished. It began when one frightened soul discovered that an open door could stay open, that a human hand could wait, and that home was not a place that pulled you inside. It was a place that let you arrive.